Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the In the Field podcast. I'm Mr. Colby, the Ag and Natural Resource Extension Agent here in Allen County.
I'm Jason Phillips, Ag and Natural Resources Agent in Simpson County.
And Adam Pure, Ag and Natural Resources Agent in Monroe County.
So, guys, we're here again. We got our second episode on the way here, and like we said, trying to keep it timely information. Middle of June right now, and we're in the middle of the wheat harvest season.
That's right. Yeah, so Simpson County is a very large wheat producing county. It's the third smallest county in the state, believe it or not, in geographic area. I believe that's behind Russell and Gallatin County. Side note, but they're the average between the third and fifth largest wheat producing county in the state of Kentucky, just to show you on a percentage basis how large a wheat producer that Simpson County is. And so we're right in the middle of wheat harvest. I'm getting some phone calls to cut some wheat yield plots for the University of Kentucky wheat yield contest. I would rate thus far we're probably 50% done. We were rolling wide open and started a little bit earlier than normal. We had some drier weather and the wheat cured up pretty quick. But it has been raining a little bit as of late, so our producers are sitting on go, but it's a little wet in the fields right now. But overall, the wheat yields have been good, not excellent, but good. Especially considering some of the dry weather that we had earlier in the year. And test weights have been very good. Overall quality has been good. I know in certain parts of the state it has been a little sketchy, especially we've had some sprouting wheat a little bit to the west of us. But overall in Simpson County, everything's going pretty well. And so that's kind of where we stand right now.
And you know that, Jason, that's good to hear considering the drought status of Kentucky and really the Midwest in general, right? So I know we're still, a few inches behind normal rainfall here in Kentucky. And for those of you that don't know, we typically get between 48 and 50 inches per year of rainfall here in Kentucky. And so if you look at the drought monitor, there's most of Kentucky besides northern Kentucky is still in moderate to severe drought stage, and there's some smaller portions that is still in extreme drought, like around Casey County, Adair County area. So with you being in us being more western Kentucky focused, that's good to hear. Just because of the drought period that we've seen, kind of overall this growing season. So
I'll be honest with you, Adam, and of course when we're in a drought situation, a lot of times the timeliness of the rains and how they fall really make a difference. And we had what I would call wheat saving rain, and it came at a great time. It was a good soaking rain, and I really think it saved our crop. It was sketchy, and we were worried, and we got that rain, and I think it really saved the crop. Now, with that being said, the yields are a little bit better than I expected. Again, not excellent, but considering the year, they're good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're talking about having good rains, and especially in our wheat systems and our grain systems, as soon as that wheat comes out of the field, our double crop beans are going in right behind them. And, a lot of times when we've had our drought in this area before, I know a lot of people are kind of behind and some people are getting their first cutting of hay in if they're in a forage system just because of how behind our pastures are. So when we're talking about harvesting our wheat, planting our beans, hauling hay and cutting hay, there's a lot of equipment on the roads. And I think we've seen it as you've been driving around. And it's important, especially when you get those big combines and things on the roads. We want to always give our farmers a little bit of leeway when they're traveling down the road. I know if you ask them, they don't want to be driving on the roads any more than they have to. If they could just teleport from field to field,
for sure,
they would.
But they got to travel from place to place, and we got to share the roads. And I would just say that if you live out in the county, a lot of the roads in your counties and my county, they're curvy, they're hilly, and just leave a little bit earlier and know that they're out there producing our food and working hard, and just be aware of that and plan for that. But I mean, last week everything was wide open. I think everybody that I talked to in Simpson County and in the state of Kentucky that had hay to cut was cutting hay. Mm-hmm. And again, you had the people out in Simpson County and wheat producing counties, I mean, rolling wide open. So there's going to be a lot of equipment on the roadways. So we just want people to use extreme caution and drive defensively and just take your time, leave a little early.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, hay. Everybody's in the past couple of weeks been really getting after it in the hay fields, and talking about the drought, and what we've had, the first part of the spring with basically no water at all. That kind of leads to a reduction in our hay harvest as well, right? Mm-hmm. And I talked to a gentleman, a producer yesterday, and he actually said that you talked about a wheat saving rain. Mm-hmm. I think in parts of Kentucky and specifically in my county, we may have had a hay saving rain because some of my producers talk like that their hay is a little bit better than what they. It's still short, but still a little bit better than what they kind of expected it to be. Yeah. And so, some of those timeliness, rainfalls, like you kind of mentioned there with the wheat harvest, I think you've kind of seen that also in the forage hay systems as well, as far as that the hay production and the yield that you're getting out of that. But like I said, it's still going to be short, but not as bad as kind of what people were kind of thinking in the beginning.
And big picture, like you said, our water table's down. Our water systems overall are low. So timely rains are important, but we really are still way behind. And I know, folks, we've gotten into a little bit more of a wetter weather pattern, but I don't think folks realize that in Kentucky, this deficit started basically in November of 2025, and it was kind of a long-term thing, and we got way behind. Yeah. And so we have a lot of ground to catch up. So one good thing about it, like in May, for instance, we hit our average precipitation for May. Well, average is good. That means we're not falling farther behind. However, we're not catching up either. Right. Yeah. So we're still behind. Yeah. So we'll pray that it continues, that we continue to see some rainfall.
And I think on the forage production side as well, if you were able to get a cutting in and maybe it wasn't the quantity you were looking for, to kind of get ahead of the game before we start putting hay out in the fall and late fall, early winter, we do offer, just within the past year, we've started offering free hay testing with our partners at Kentucky State over in Glasgow. So really close by as well. We can get your hay sampled for you. You can check out a probe from any of our offices and get it sampled, because the time to get a game plan is not whenever you try to roll out that first bale. You want to be having a plan ahead, especially if you've had a rough year, didn't put up the amount you've wanted to. Check and see what you did get put up, if it's good enough to last you through the winter. So it's important to get that checked out, and it's something you can do with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And hay testing is kind of like soil sampling, right, or soil testing. A lot of times you're not going to go out and put just random fertilizer on your field, right? You're going to want to get that tested to make sure the soil nutrients in that soil, so you know what to add as far as nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, whatever it may need, lime, and it's the same thing with your hay testing as well, right? So your cattle or small ruminants, whatever it is that you're feeding, throughout the wintertime, there's a certain threshold of nutrients that, they're going to need and require to stay healthy throughout the cold winter months, right? And if your hay is not up to par as far as providing that nutritional value, then that can be an issue, right? And so it's always a good idea to get that hay sampled, get those test results, so going into the winter months, whenever it's hay feeding season, whether you may need to supplement with feed or some type of mineral or whatever it may be. So that's definitely important to know. And of course, quality of hay also determines is sometimes, a lot of times, depending on the timing of cutting, and kind of the maintenance of that once the hay is basically from cutting to getting the hay rolled out into the field, right? And so it's definitely important that we do that.
It should be something that we just get in the habit of doing.
Right.
We do it all the time, and with the cattle prices being where they are, we want to maintain good body condition scores. And a lot of times, with our grass hay, we may not even see the deficit may not be in protein. It seems like everybody wants to put an emphasis on protein, but a lot of times it's those energy levels.
That's the first thing that everybody looks at is crude protein.
Yeah.
And like you said, that might not be what you need to be looking at.
Correct.
Right. I think protein is super important when we're talking about when you're feeding your animals and making sure that they gain weight, because obviously that's pounds on the animal is dollars in your pocket. But the big thing is looking at those energy levels. During the wintertime, they need the energy and the carbs from that hay to keep themselves warm. That's where they use that from. When it gets in those, like when we had our ice storm back at the beginning of this year, that time an animal's not thinking about putting on more muscle. It's just trying to stay warm and stay alive. So having adequate energy levels, protein is important. It is super important. But all those other things that a hay test gives you, that tells you what the animal needs and how to get everything dialed in to have animal health is the important part.
Whenever it's snowing outside and you look out into your cattle pasture, if your cows have a big blanket of snow on their back, that means they're staying warm and healthy. If they don't have any snow on their backs,
the heat's escaping their body.
Then the heat is escaping, and so you need to address that issue, because overall animal health, can be an issue there.
And it can be intimidating. I know when you get the hay test result back and you're like, what the heck do these numbers mean?
Yeah.
And, we can help you interpret those numbers and say, you need to supplement with this or that, or you're in good shape. Mm-hmm. And it's also based on the stage that your animals are in and what their needs are. Yeah. So, different animals have different needs, and we want to be sure that those are met.
Yeah, definitely need to take a look if you're in a season of calving, foaling, any animal that's going to be having a litter, having animals, and then also lactation afterwards. Those nutrient requirements are going to go up because they're making their own food and then food for their offspring as well. So be sure to adjust on the season, whatever season you're in. Is super important with hay. And talking about hay testing, another thing is when we're talking about rains, we obviously were lacking a little bit this spring. We're getting some more, but a lot of times when we have some of these torrential rains, several inches, several days in a row, we get some standing water in some of our vegetable production systems, our fields, and that can lead to some plant disease issues. And I know we've kind of seen, as we've gotten some more rain in May, got back on track, we've also seen coinciding some more disease issues that have come up in the county. So talk a little bit about what we've been seeing, and then kind of talk about how we have gotten our plant disease systems that we work with up at UK.
Well, first off, I don't want people to hit the panic button.
Right.
This is common for this time of the year, and as it gets more humid and hotter, and like you say, we've got some ponding issues, that favors fungal disease development. And the longer that something's in the field, inevitably, the higher the risk of it getting a disease. So this is common, but I want to emphasize that we do have opportunities for folks to send plant samples off to the lab through their local extension office and collaborate with their local extension agent. We do farm visits. Or you can bring those plants into the Simpson County or Allen County or Monroe County extension offices, and we may be able to diagnose those on the spot. However, there are some symptoms and symptomology that's not easily diagnosable just by visual observation. So a lot of times we'll have to send those to the lab. The plant disease diagnosticians, they'll look at them, but they'll also maybe intubate the sample, and they'll have to, let that sit there, and I guess it's incubate the sample. But they'll have to let it.
They might get intubated.
You
never know.
But we're incubating samples, and they'll let it actually, in order to detect what disease and discern what it is, that they got to get it. We got to get it into the lab. And that is not of any cost to the producer. And so I want to emphasize, and a lot of times, we send it in and it's an abiotic disorder, meaning that it's not actually a disease. It could be something environmental, or, just chemical related. That happens a lot. So, I just want to say that at this time of the year, those are things that we need to have on our radar. We need to be scouting our crops regularly, whether it be, tomatoes, whether it be anything in a commercial vegetable system, a home vegetable system, field crops, corn, soybeans, all of those things. And we offer plant disease diagnostics for any plants. But you do need to be prepared. When you bring those samples in, maybe you all could address what constitutes a good sample, and maybe some of the questions that they need to be prepared to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, every year, obviously, this time of year in Kentucky, it's always a hot, humid, summer, starting, in July, but, typically. And so, with the plant samples, there's ways that we need to kind of address that and to bring in a proper sample, right? So what I like to do is, you talked about, we could go out to the farm or the home or whatever it may be, or, they could bring that into us. Mm-hmm. So there's different ways that we can kind of address this, right? Kind of what I like to do is maybe a picture at first to see, and if I can't diagnose that from a picture, maybe have them bring that in or go out to the site, right? But if you are going to bring a sample in for us to send off, there's some things that we need to be aware of to bring in the proper sample. And so, one of those is depending on what type of sample it is, because there are some different types of samples that we can send off. So there's tissue analysis that we can send off for nutritional, analysis, of that, whatever that plant may be. And there's also, of course, the plant diagnostic to look for diseases or other things that may be wrong with the plants as well. And so, if you're going to bring in a sample for a tissue analysis, which means you're going to bring in the leaves of whatever your crop is. And so you need to bring in several leaves of that crop, right? Don't just bring in one small, leaf and try to get that, a test on that, because that's not going to work. We need multiple leaves. Depending on the crop, it could be 10 to 15 leaves of that specific crop. So bring in several of those for us to send off. And then for plant disease, depending on what your crop is, a lot of times we want to see you bring in the entire plant, right? So a lot of times we want the root system as well, even sometimes soil, a small soil sample with that as well, because it might be something that's nutritional. And so if you send in the entire plant plus some soil, then that's going to give you a better idea of what the problem might be.
It varies, from plant to plant.
Right.
So you may bring in a whole tomato plant with the roots,
right?
Because they're going to look at the roots as well as the plant above the ground, as well as do a quick soil test. Right. So does that mean I need to bring you in a whole tree if I need to get a tree tested?
Well, I guess it depends on how big your tree is.
What about a leaf? Would that work?
Yeah. So you mentioned trees, which we kind of joke about it, but like we get a lot of tree questions, or at least I do, every year, like, this time of year, what's wrong with my tree? It's dying, whatever. Depending on how large your tree is and that kind of things, like, we can send some samples in of leaves, not the whole tree. Obviously, if it's a 100-year-old tree, we're not going to send the whole thing, right? We're going to cut it down.
You need to dig that up.
Yeah. Get the excavator out there.
Might be able to get a sapling in the mail, maybe.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but with trees, a lot of times, if you can just get a branch off of a leaf or off of a tree, then a lot of times we can diagnose off of that, depending on what obviously what your tree is and what the symptoms are and that kind of stuff as well.
And what I generally try to tell people, because remember, we're mailing that sample, so we normally want to send it at the start of the week. So we want it.
Yeah.
We don't want it to sit over the weekend, and then it be non-diagnosable because it's too dried up and not a good sample when they get it in the lab. But I tell folks, if you're cutting a limb or limbs, try to get some that have fairly healthy leaves, some that are in that transitional phase, and then some that have look rough, so that you can see all stages of what you're seeing.
Yeah, and that's going to help our plant pathologists, at UK to kind of determine what may be the root cause. Because like I said, they do several different there's several different methods that they put these plants through as far as the testing, right? Like you said, the intubation or incubation.
We do.
They
do
put
it
on,
all.
They put them. They're on life support. So, but they do just microscopic, just visual tests. They do actual, the plant cells. There's a lot of different methods that they use to, and so like to your point is, if they can see that plant visually in the healthy stage, the transitional stage, then the kind of the dead decaying stage, then that will give them kind of an idea of where to start at with their test.
We're doing our best to paint that picture of what's going on for them through the sample.
Right. And one thing that I always like to do, especially if I'm going on site, take pictures. Take really good pictures of not just the plant, but also what's around, right? So, if you've got, just say, X plant and it's, planted beside of a large building that doesn't get any shade or something, that might be part of your issue, right? Or if it's a tree that's dying and it's planted right beside of a road or something, that might be the part of the issue. Well, it might not just be something that's environmental. It could be something that, that's kind of man-made problem as well.
The more details, the better.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, too, we were talking about taking pictures with mine. We try to avoid the prolonging the how long the plant's in the mail and how long it sits. I always like to include some pictures, and I'll print them off on a document and slide them in with the plant when I mail it up there. That way, if something were to happen and the plant was to kind of decay a little bit more than it normally would have and they can't get a good read, if they can see what it looked like, a lot of times I try to get some pictures of it, in the ground, in the high tunnel, wherever it may be. Get some pictures of what it was while it was there, and then when I get back to the office before I mail it, kind of lay some out, get a nice neutral background, and get some good pictures so they can see if there's leaf spotting or stem blights or any wilting, and send some pictures in with it. And if you're bringing some in, if you can get some of those pictures before you send them in, we can get them printed off and put in the box. That way, just more tools in their tool belt. We like to try to give them as much information as we can, because there's a lot of times where it can be hard to just, with as many things as we have going on, abiotics, bacterial, viral, fungal, all the different disease types, it's hard to narrow down unless it's something just really textbook what it could be.
And timing and details are super important, so be aware of what's been done.
That's what I brought the sheet here that we use to turn in. They have all this information about, what part of the plant is diseased, the symptoms, the location of the plant, what's the pattern of the disease. Is it on a whole field of crops? Is it just on a sporadic few? How old the plant is? The more information we can give them to send up to the lab, the better, because a lot of times little details may rule something out or add something back into play. Whereas if you just tell them, oh, I've got a tomato, it's got spots on it, there's a whole laundry list of things that can be.
And be aware of any pesticide applications when those were applied. A lot of people struggle with rates. It's going to ask for, okay, what did you use? When did you use it? Whether it be an insecticide, herbicide, any of those things, any pesticide, fungicide, or fertility. What kind of fertility, program did you use on that plant?
Right. Yeah, for sure. And we talk about this time of year, and if you are whether you're a gardener, a first-time gardener, or someone that has gardened for a long time, or may not even be garden, but just growing a crop in general, especially if you've done it for a couple of years at least. we always kind of know, like say this certain time of year, that we're probably going to start to see some disease pressure, right? And so that's why it's very important that we, have an idea of what those diseases might be, but also some preventative measures as far as fungicides, insecticides, things like that we can apply to maybe prevent some of these issues from occurring, right?
Right.
And so that's important to know the crop that you are planting and growing. Get very familiar with that, the growth of that plant, and the diseases that you may see throughout the growing season, and then that way you'll kind of know what might be coming up down the pike, and then so you'll know, what we need to do. Because
a lot of fungicides are preventative. Whereas we're scouting, we're looking for insects, and typically we're not we don't recommend applying insecticides when insects aren't present. There's an economic threshold, and if so many insects are present in a given area, then an insecticide application is warranted. But then a lot of your fungicides, again, are preventative rather than reactive. So I would say, Adam, that's a good point. Do your homework, think about what you're growing, and research kind of recommended disease prevention methods as well as insects that are typically problematic. So scouting is very critical.
And we try to get, like you said, especially with fungicides or just crop scouting in general, we try to get ahead of the game. If maybe you face some of the same pressures year to year. And if that is the case, that's when we talk about crop rotation. If you've consistently grown the same, not even necessarily the same vegetable, but if you grow the same family of vegetables, if you maybe it's not just always melons, but if you grow melons and then grow squash, the same cucurbit family, the diseases overlap, pest problems overlap. So that's when we need to start thinking, if you know that you have had some issues in the past years, you can only kind of fight it for so long. It becomes, like we're saying, economical. If you're having to apply so many chemicals to get through the year because of known disease problems, that's when we can start thinking about rotating our locations of our fields or our high tunnels to kind of break that cycle up a little bit.
And we've got lots of information on cultural disease control methods like you're talking about, and chemical spray schedules. Sometimes there's mechanical things that we can do, but there's a multitude. Integrated pest management is what we like to refer to it as, but there's a multitude of different ways to try to mitigate those disease problems. And of course, we got information on anything that you may be interested in, and those recommended spray schedules.
I think a lot of times when we talk about plant disease, I feel like the three of us especially, we're always sending each other pictures of things we run into. And I feel like this year, as a lot of times with a lot of our viral diseases and other things, as the insect population takes off during the first part of summer, they vector a lot of the diseases that go between plants. As they feed on a diseased plant, they spread it to a healthy plant, and that kind of starts a cycle. I know me and you have both now dealt with producers that have been dealing with the tomato spotted wilt a little bit, transmitted by thrips.
Yeah, and after 21 years, every year is different. I'll say that first and foremost. Every year is different, and this is actually the most prominent, the most cases that I've ever seen of tomato spotted wilt virus, which is vectored by thrips. You don't get tomato spotted wilt virus without a thrip. And so it's just really something that we're seeing a lot. And for whatever reason, the environment this year and the way that everything played out must have favored the thrips and the thrip population. But one thing, one of the very first things to notice on like a tomato plant. So I know they really like tobacco and tomatoes, which are both solanaceous crops. But one thing that we really notice is with a lot of your fungal diseases, they're soil-borne. And so they start at the bottom of the plant and work their way up. Whereas with the thrips, they actually start towards the top of the plant. And they're feeding. They got a piercing, sucking mouth part. So insects got one of two mouth parts, chewing or piercing, sucking. And so they're sucking the juices, and it causes a little bit of contortion, a little bit of drawing up, But tomato spotted wilt virus is what they transmit to the plant, and they can transmit that to tobacco as well. And a lot of times, if there's weeds or a fence row adjacent to it that can harbor those insects, that's where they're living. That's where they're coming from. So a lot of times we'll see that on the edges of tobacco patches or the edges of tomato plantings.
And that's exactly where the first case, I feel like that the earliest one that either one of us had was in a high tunnel system, and they used good plastic culture and growing methods to keep down weeds without having to use as many herbicides and as things as other people have to. But in this high tunnel, the way it was set up, the heating pipe ran right down the middle, and they didn't lay any plastic directly underneath the heating pipe. And so there was a little bit of a weed population right there in the middle. And then, of course, the plants that were affected were the directly adjacent rows right off of that central heating pipe. And so, like you were saying, controlling the weed population in and around your fields where they typically live is really important. And a lot of times, because it's a viral thing, not something that we can treat on the plant. So as a best way to keep that disease spread to a minimum, try to remove that plant from your system as quick as possible to keep it from going to another plant.
And so we talk about prevention, and I mean, folks can try to do everything right, and that's what we're here for. Issues arise, no doubt. And so never hesitate to ask us any questions. But in this case, too, sanitation. You talked about crop rotation, some things you can do, on the front end to try to minimize your disease, likelihood of disease. And sanitation is a big one. Just removing diseased plants, doing things in the fall, working that crop debris under, because a lot of times those fungal spores, which I know we're talking about thrips right now, but overall sanitation, mowing, keeping it clean around the garden spot or around the field. These are all examples of cultural methods.
And I think that also, especially for maybe beginning producers or growers, or maybe even seasoned growers that move in here from other states, like out west or up north, that maybe don't have as much insect pressure or disease pressure. The climate's a little bit different. I feel like that once they move here in this hot, humid, environment. Just the other day, I was, talking to one of my Mennonite producers that's from New York, right? And so he moves in here, and he said, "Man, you guys have got a lot of problems down here as far as insects and disease and stuff." He said, "Because in New York, up there it's not as hot, not as humid. The climate's a little bit different up there." He said, he was growing produce up there and didn't have any really many problems at all. But whenever he got here, he was kind of in for a surprise. And so I feel like, especially if you're moving in or from somewhere else, maybe not the same climate that we have here, or you're a new producer or grower, it can definitely take you by surprise as far as, some of the issues that we kind of face. And, there's a lot of talk about, growing organic and things like that, in which that's all, wonderful if you can do that. But in Kentucky, it's really kind of hard to be 100% organic just because of the insects and all the disease pressures that we do see. It can be done, obviously, but it's really hard to do that. And that's why we see, some of the difficulties with people that maybe are new.
Yeah. And I think our pathology department does a great job in providing spray recommendations, both, traditionally as well as low spray and organic options. Yeah. We've got a lot of publications that are geared towards either production method.
Right. Yeah, and there's plenty of, as we've advanced, agriculture has grown, there's more science behind it. We can definitely see a lot of times there are more organic, not necessarily if they are truly organic, but more towards the organic options. When we're talking about fungicides, a lot of the copper-based ones they're not very harsh, so they're a good alternative to some of the other ones.
Neem oils
for insects and things. Yeah. A lot of especially if you're growing corn or other crops that are susceptible to worms and caterpillar pressure, a BT product, which is just a natural bacteria. So there are a lot of products, and like I said, they try to give you multiple recommendations from either the disease lab or us. If you come to us and say, I've got this problem, we check it out for you and say, I'm leaning towards you more of a organic option, we can definitely look into that for you and get you that information.
And, a lot of times it comes down to marketing and the markets that the individuals want to cater to if they're selling. And some people, are just growing for themselves. And we've got information to accommodate all, anywhere in between.
And I will say with the price of all of the stuff that is involved in production agriculture, it's gone up tremendously year to year, and especially this year. And so for a lot of our, customers that are, just agriculture customers that are, not as in tune because we're so far removed from the average American being a farmer. But want to assure people as we issue the pesticide license through our offices in our counties to our producers. with the cost of insecticides, herbicides, all the above, trust me, farmers aren't just spraying to spray. Some of the stuff that they have to use to control an insect population can be hundreds of dollars per quart. So it's not something that they're just spraying willy-nilly that they just want to use and use. They're trying
they're not doing it for their health.
No, they're definitely not doing it for their health and for their wallets either.
Yeah.
And our farmers are trained. They have to go to pesticide education courses, and if they're applicators, they have to get a commercial application license, if they're spraying for money, and go to continuing education. So they're trained and know how to handle those pesticides and apply them properly. And the EPA just doesn't, they do extensive research. It goes on for years before they approve pesticides. So there's a lot of time and a lot of different things involved and at play. So I think it all just boils down to what that individual wants to do and how they want to do it. And we've got information, for all of the above.
Yeah, of course. Well, we've talked a lot about some of the stuff we offer here at the office. Like I said, we're kind of coming into that time that plant diseases are starting to uptick. Don't be discouraged. Like Adam was saying, if you're a newer person, either just to gardening or gardening in Kentucky, if we see something and you've got a new disease pressure, maybe something doesn't take off as well as you'd like to, please come talk to us because, like I said, that's what the three of us are here for, and all your county agents are here for. We're trying to get you to be successful with whatever your operation is. And so if you've got some disease pressures, we'd love to help you out and get you dialed in.
I mean, we're seeing a lot of different things, and, every year, again, this time of year, it's just common that it's going to start. Like, for example, a couple of weeks ago, I started getting lots of pictures of people sending me pictures of their apple or pear trees and saying, what's wrong with this tree? And it's fire blight. You have certain limbs that turn brown and it's kind of spotty. Now, some varieties have more disease resistance to fire blight, which can be fairly destructive to apple and pear trees. And we see it both on, fruit-producing trees as well as ornamentals. And I get questions from both. But, there's nothing that you can do about it right now other than be aware of it. And we do have a fire blight tracking tool that you can look at going forward.
The whole state of Kentucky is red.
Yeah. If you know your
We'll save you
trees,
the time.
if you know your tree's susceptible, and you can treat in advance, but that's actually a bacteria. And we've got publications on fire blight, but it showed up. So the symptoms, it contracted fire blight back in the spring, but the symptoms just recently showed up. So that's just something, you can kind of mark your calendar from year to year that's going to show up about this time. And so if you've not planted an apple or pear tree yet and you're planning to, definitely study on that and see which varieties have good fire blight resistance.
Yeah, like you said, we've got multiple publications and also, access to the specialists at the university that, if you are planning to start a new orchard, we can definitely help you with selection, of varieties, and things like that. Depending on what you're wanting to do, what your goals are, and I guess kind of on the topic, since we're kind of on the topic of new beginning farmers or producers. I guess we'll just give a plug for Farming 101, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Might as well.
Yeah, so we the Mammoth Cave area agents, which is consists of a 10-county radius of counties here that we call the Mammoth Cave area. So it's like Monroe, Allen, Hart, Warren, Logan, Simpson, Barron, Metcalfe. Those are the counties. Edmonson County. So those are the counties that are in the Mammoth Cave area, and we've all come together to put together a Farming 101 course. It's an online course for beginning farmers. I mean, you don't have to be a beginning farmer to learn good information.
Well,
about,
I'll say, a lot of good information.
A lot of good information for
That's pretty
folks.
impressive. Did you count? Did he name them all?
All 10.
Did you?
All 10.
Okay.
I did.
I think you did.
All right.
I didn't miss a single one.
Okay.
We can always play
Well, I was
back.
just gonna say, I'm like,
Mystery play.
I'm like, is he about to name all these?
That's
I
right.
think he is.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, good job.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, it was a cool project to put together and work on. And like I said, not just for beginning farmers. We got lots of good information that is applicable for people to. If you've been doing it for 30, 40 years, you can still go back and need a refresher on something. But we have kind of those first general courses or sessions that we have designed for beginning farmers. They tell people who we are in Extension, our partners that we work with out at USDA, conservation offices, get you familiar with your support system in farming, kind of how to get things set up, and then how to take off and really get your operation going. But,
And you don't have to be in the 10-county area to participate because it is online, and you've got those fundamental building blocks that everybody needs, and then it spider webs off from there depending on what route that you want to go in terms of your area of interest.
right, we have those kind of general pathways that everybody's going to have to learn about: getting a farm number, bank account, taxes. Information, regardless
Equipment.
of whether you do livestock,
Safety.
crops. You're going to have those basic things. Pretty much everybody's going to have some sort of equipment, like you said. So regardless of enterprise that you choose, you go through those general sessions, and then that's when you can break down into, okay, here's videos about beef cattle, here's videos about sheep and goats, here's about commercial horticulture. And so then you can kind of deep dive into what you think you may, and if you have no idea, watch them all. You may be undecided, and after going through them, you say, okay, I do want to do some livestock. I do want to grow some crops.
And you get all of this for the low price of only $35.
And we're going to roll out pretty soon that $35 that we have. Part of it goes towards course maintenance, but then our last session that we've just added on recently to the course, farm safety. We talk a lot about farm safety. It's not people think about deep sea diver welders and other things, but farming is one of the most dangerous occupations.
Very much is. Large equipment a lot of times, outside, heat stress, insects, wildlife.
You name it.
Farmers encounter it all.
And so we've got, as part of joining the course fee, part of that will go to everybody that joins and pays for the course. We'll get the farm safety kit to keep on them, so that you will have kind of first aid for burns, cuts, things like that. But check out the course if you are a new farmer, beginning farmer, or just want a little bit of a refresher. But I think we've covered a lot of stuff. I think we've got a good system going here. So we look forward to doing some more episodes for you guys. Like I said, stay tuned. Check us out on all of your podcast platforms and subscribe to us over on YouTube. Just want to remind everybody that UK is an equal opportunity provider. So come check out your local extension office, and we'll see you next time on In the Field.